Enjoy a seat at the table for great conversation and good company.
Welcome to And Good Company. I'm Sarah Fiedelholtz. We all know a great dinner party isn't really about the food. It's about the people seated around the table engaging in lively discussions. And Good Company gives you a seat at the table to enjoy smart and interesting conversations as they happen. I am very pleased to be in the company of Terri Richardson, the features editor at the Journal Gazette and author of the new book, 100 Things to Do in Fort Wayne Before You Die. Okay, so welcome.
Thank you. Welcome. I'm glad to be here, so thank you.
Yes, I'm so excited to have a fellow journalist, local journalist at the table.
Right.
So first, let's talk about how this book came about and the purpose of it in terms of creating the ultimate Fort Wayne bucket list.
Yeah, I was actually reached by the publisher, I should say contacted by the publisher last year, February of last year. And they actually have these type of books all across the country. So it's sort of one of their travel series that they do. And I asked them, I said, well, how did you get my name? And apparently they Googled my name and found out that, this is what I do at the Journal Gazette. And so I said, sure. Now I don't know if I was their sixth choice and 5 other people turned it down. I have no idea. But at any rate, I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And so, yeah, that's how, and it took me until it was released in the fall, and it went to press in May. So there you go.
And so the idea was that you came up with 100 things to do.
Yes.
So it's really, although it's more, to me, when I was reading, I was like, okay, this is going to be like crazy things to do, like, maybe you're supposed to, I don't know, kiss under a bridge or, all those things you think about, or skydive off the top of the
right.
Allen County Courthouse or something. But it's really more like a travel guide to Fort Wayne, would you say?
It is. And, and I did try to look for kind of those unique kind of things when I could find them. And, but yeah, it is, because so you'll have your usual suspects in there, the things that when people come here. But I also wanted to try and find, if you're a long-term resident, kind of those things like you talked about, kind of those weird things that you didn't know about. And I didn't find any skydiving off the building or anything like that.
You did find a ghost?
I did. I found a ghost.
Where's the ghost?
Yeah, the ghost at the Embassy Theater, which a lot of people may know, but if you don't know, he's a friendly ghost, Buddy. And yeah, so you can go there and recently I was actually just at the embassy, and they were telling me, some of the volunteers were telling me their stories about Buddy. So he's still around, he's still there, and apparently will sit down next to you, and there you go.
So out of the 100 things, so how many, because as I was reading it, I was checking, and I've only been, I've been living only in Fort Wayne for 2 years, and I really have to subtract 1 because, the pandemic. So I was kind of checking, okay, did that. How many out of the 100? Now, how long have you been in Fort Wayne?
We've been here 22 years.
Okay, so in 22 years.
Yes.
And how many out of the 100 have you done?
I would say out of the main 100, I've done them all. Now, there are a few, because when you look through the book, there are actually more than 100 things to do in there. So,
right, because you give like 3 farmers markets or...
Exactly. So like if you go to a winery, then I'd say, okay, well, hey, just within an hour distance, you can go to all these other wineries. So like that, for instance, I've not gone to all of the wineries. So
I would highly suggest that, though.
Yes, that would be a nice
and the
trip.
Local craft beer trail.
There you go,
and
right.
there's a chocolate trail, like desserts.
There is, yes.
I think you should have to write part 2.
Well, I do. I already have a list, of unfortunately of some things that I had to cut out. And some things that I have found out since the book's come out. And I'm like, goodness sakes, how could I not know about that? But yeah, so I can tell you I've done all of the 100. And actually that's what my husband and I spent during the pandemic. So we went, and it was a little difficult, doing it during the pandemic, because I ended up having to take some things out because some things closed and some things moved. And, a lot of things were shifting back and forth. So, but yeah, we spent most of last year kind of going to these things that we hadn't been to, or that we just heard about and said, oh yeah, we want to go to that, but we never have. So yeah.
So if you had to give people the top 5 things, the musts, like if you're coming to, that are really iconic Fort Wayne,
Yes.
what would you say those are?
Oh goodness. Well, obviously the top would be Coney Island if you're looking
Okay.
for iconic things. I would say Coney Island. I would say one of my favorite restaurants, if you've not been to it, it's hard to get a reservation. You got to call early, but Italian Connection. I think it's just kind of that quintessential, it's set in a little home, and it almost kind of reminds you of, being in one of those, I tell people, I said, you can kind of look at it two ways. So it's almost like as if you're in a mob movie, you feel like the Don is going to be sitting in the back room.
Right.
Or you can feel like Lady and the Tramp, where it's so romantic, you're going to share a noodle with whoever you're eating with. So Italian Connection is one of my other favorites. Obviously the zoo. I mean, that's an iconic thing. To go there. So let's see, that's 3. I feel like Fort Wayne has really done a great job with their nature preserves, like the hiking trails, the River Greenway, all those opportunities to get outside. So like I said, Frankie Park is mentioned in there, and when I looked at Frankie Park, I was like, gosh, this is sort of like our own little Central Park here in Fort Wayne, because there's just so many elements to that.
Is that the one that has the dog beach?
No, that is
Okay.
actually at Fox Island.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So that I was like, because I was reading, I was like, wait, there's a dog beach where my dog can. Okay, so that so that was the one I.
Yeah. And and actually, that's another of my favorite things to do is going to Fox Island and digging for fossils. I had never been able to do it, and actually, we went several weekends, and I was like, I want to go dig for fossils. My husband's like, oh, please, I don't want to dig for fossils anymore. So so those kind of things, and obviously.
Let's just stop. Why don't you explain about Fox Island? And I mean, to you it seems because you've written. Oh yeah, of course you can. Explain this idea of digging for fossils.
Yes, there is an aggregate company here in Fort Wayne that will come and dump, and that's actually in the book as well. It's sort of like Fort Wayne's Grand Canyon, where they have dug, so much you can stand at an observation deck and see that. Well,
that's the quarry, right?
That is the quarry.
So so you can go and see that.
Yes.
So you can see where it comes from.
Yes.
And then
they will take that and they dump it in. They have like this little fossil archaeological area in Fox Island, and you can take your tools or you can find a nearby stick or whatever, and you can just go to town in this pile of rock. And you can find, like I have found a few, I didn't find a trilobite, but I found a few like little animals. I don't know what they are. Lots of shell, all this stuff. And you can just dig for fossils there at Fox Island. And they actually have some samples, some pretty cool samples that they have found at Fox Island on display that you can see. So
wow.
Yeah, it's and of course with it being like limestone and the shell and everything, it's really easy to dig for that.
Right.
So yeah.
And I think that you're also proving, when people always say there's nothing to do, there's nothing, and people will think because like, oh, there's nothing to do in Fort Wayne. But I always joke, so when I lived in Miami and there was a publication that's 124 pages every week of just things to do, and people would say to me, there's nothing to do. So, I mean, the point is that there are lots of things to do, but you have to seek them out, right? They're not going to just, like, it's not just like in New York City, yes, granted, you open your door and you don't know, there's adventure waiting.
Yes.
But there are lots of different types of adventures, just like the fossils. And so what are some of the other, like, if you had to plan a day for somebody, okay, and they're like, for kids' vacation or something, and they wanted to have a day. So start from breakfast and take me through the day, what you would have them do.
Sure. Well, if I were going to plan for a day for the kids, I probably would start out, we would probably go to breakfast, maybe at Cindy's Diner, because that's like a really cool thing. Of course, we have to get there early because 15 can only sit there at a time.
Right.
So go to Cindy's Diner, order a plate of garbage.
Right. Now explain what garbage is, because people might think, when I first heard like I'm like, what is this, like yesterday's leftovers or something?
Right. So basically it's a big plate. I think it has like hash browns and eggs and sausage and bacon. So it's like kind of all cooked together, and it's just put on this gigantic plate. And then, of course, they also have donuts that they still make. They still have the old donut maker from one of the department stores downtown. So you can actually get a little bag of donuts to take with you. So I would probably go Cindy's, order a plate of garbage, and then take a a bag of donuts with us. And then probably from there, I would probably go to the zoo. I would hit the zoo, and then maybe even the splash pads. And one of the things like with the parks is, and this is a free thing, if you're looking on a budget, you can go to the splash pads, eat your donuts while you're running around in the splash pad. And then when it comes time to be able to have lunch, then maybe you can head back down to downtown and maybe grab some Coney dogs and then walk around downtown. Look at all the art murals. I mean, that in itself is really cool to do, to just go walk down the alleys and look at the art murals. Head over to Promenade Park and, check that out and go to the playground. And then, honestly, by then, if your kids still have energy, I'm thinking at this point, then, you could probably, again, if you didn't finish up with the art murals, do that. But I figure by that time, they'll probably be tired and they're ready.
Or you could always then go for a show at the Embassy Theater, or you could go for a game with the Tin Caps or the Comets or Mad Ants,
depending on what season it is.
Or you could drop them off with a babysitter and then, for dinner.
Yes.
But I think also one of the really important things I think to talk about is this idea of the perception of downtown Fort Wayne. Mm-hmm. Because I live downtown, mm-hmm. and so even for residents, there's still this sense of, is it safe downtown? Mm-hmm. It's so far. Like, I don't understand. People tell me it's so far. Everything in Fort Wayne is 20 minutes. Or people will say, oh, there's nowhere to park.
Yeah.
There's plenty of parking.
Yes.
So what do you think it is about this misperception of downtown and what it's become?
Mm-hmm. Well, I was just talking to somebody the other day. I think for a lot of people who've lived here for a long time, it's if you haven't been downtown in a while, even in the last 5 years, just like really been downtown, it has changed so much. And, when we first moved here 22 years ago, now I will admit, it was hard for us to find things. The art in arts community wasn't as vibrant as it is now. And in working at the newspaper, it was obviously easy for me to find things, but now there has been such an effort put into what is happening in downtown. So I feel like a lot of people are still kind of gun shy about, trying to get downtown and experience it. And, the great thing is like last Saturday when they started the downtown Holly shopping, I was so amazed at how many people were actually downtown walking around, and I thought, yes, this is great. So I think that's a large part of it. And when I talk to people, like with this book, for instance, a lot of them will tell me that they're like, oh well, downtown. I don't really go downtown. There's not anything downtown. And I tell them this, just what we were talking about. I'm like, well, there's so many things now that are happening. Right. So I feel like some people might still have that kind of older mentality of what they remember about downtown. I mean, obviously they still come down for the Night of Lights and, Coney Island and stuff, but they don't really try to come downtown and spend that time to explore. And there's just so much going on and new things happening.
Yeah, I mean, I joke that, so when I originally start coming to Fort Wayne and people wouldn't find out where I was from and where I've lived, which is only large cities, they would always be like, oh, well, Fort Wayne is so much better than it used to be. Mm. And I sort of would think to myself, Fort Wayne has a passion for its history.
Yes.
But it has to let go of its past.
Yes.
So when somebody would say this to me, like, oh, it's so much, like, I don't have anything to judge it for. So after a while, I sort of got a little facetious and I would say, so what would you like me to do with this piece of information? One, are you entitled to enjoy all of the things that now Fort Wayne has more than I do?
Yeah.
Or two, should I feel sorry that you stayed here when it wasn't so great? Like, just move forward and not compare back and just think about where it's going and where it's headed and sort of to embrace that. And then I understand the appreciation of history, and you even, there's several things you can do in the book you talk about that are very important to the history. Yes. But I think it's sort of let go of the past. The same thing with the perception of the rivers.
Yes.
I mean, what other city can you think of where their downtown, you cannot tell that there are 3 rivers that run through? Most people would have built their whole downtown around the rivers. And if you think about it, before 4 years ago, there was no entry point
Right.
to the river from downtown.
Exactly.
So I think that, and now look what they're doing, the whole
Yeah.
riverfront development.
Yeah, you don't have to wade through the weeds to get to to the river.
Right, or to think that, and that's what even the perception of the rivers, that people think, oh, they're dirty. Well, no, it's just that it's a brown clay
Yes.
bottom. It's actually a very nutrient rich.
Right.
And that the the runoff or the sewage. Well, no, that's why we did this whole big Mama Joe project.
Yes.
And so I think it's like educating people. And
It is.
And so after you spent almost a year working on this, and what do you respond when people say, or there's nothing to do, or there's nothing to do in Fort Wayne, or
Yeah. Well, I joke now that I can take this book and be like, don't, there's 100 things in there right here. But it's always kind of, even working at the Journal Gazette, it's always kind of drove me crazy when people would say that. There's nothing to do in Fort Wayne. And I remember a few years ago, I actually got an email from a mom. Actually, I think it was a grandmother. I'm sorry. It was a grandmother who was like, I have my grandkids for the summer and I'm looking for some free things to do and I can't find anything. And I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? You can't find? And so I came up with this list for her, and it actually ended up, I did a story about it. I think I ended up with like 20 or 30 free things for her to do for her grandkids. And, and that was just me thinking off the top of my head. So when people tell me that there's nothing to do, I'm always like, are you kidding me? There's this, there's this, there's this, there's this. But again, we were talking about like the history. I kind of wanted to go back to that, because one thing I think that is really cool about Fort Wayne is we do have this history, but they are taking this history and using the old and making it new, just like with the landing, for instance. And so a lot of these, I think these bright minds and this new way of thinking are taking these old buildings, and they're taking these things and they're keeping that history part of it, but then they're now transforming it to these cool places. And and I actually heard when I do these book signings, there was an older gentleman who was he's lived from Fort Wayne all of his life, and he got a little upset because he's like, well, all there is in downtown now, he says, is uppity businesses. And I had to laugh, and I was like, really, uppity businesses? And I think what he was meaning is that obviously there's a new generation that's coming in, and there's a new way of thinking. And so what you're getting now is meeting that next generation of people who are moving into Fort Wayne, which we hope will move into Fort Wayne and start, having kids and raising families and stuff. So, so getting back to your question, it always drove me crazy when people say that. And even now, like I said, I have this whole list, and knowing all these things that are about to come, that it's exciting, and it really is.
Mm-hmm. And so you've referenced a couple times your work at the Journal Gazette.
Yeah.
So how long have you been with the Journal Gazette?
22 years.
22 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that I moved here to my husband got a job, and so as soon as I got here, I started working.
Okay. And then did you start on the news side and then evolve into features, or have you always been on the features side?
Nope. I started on the news side. I was actually the bureau bureau chief there, so I was in charge of all of the coverage out in the counties, which was great because it allowed me to expand and see what was going on in the other counties. And then when the position came open for the features editor, I said, you know what, I'm kind of done with news. I'm kind of done with police and courts and all that. And I said, I want to do something fun. So I got the features job.
And obviously there is always friction in a newsroom, because I was, when I was at the Chicago, sometimes I was on the features side. There's always that friction between the hard news people and the features people. But I wanted to sort of take, I think the big elephant in the room is really looking at the state of local media, and obviously what is happening in our local media and with our newspapers.
Right.
And it's not just Fort Wayne, it's across the country.
Right.
So as journalists, what do you think is really the impetus for this decline in readership and interest in, it's not just the newspaper, to me, it's what the newspaper contains, which is the information about where you live.
Right.
What do you think that the impetus for that is, and why?
Well, obviously, I wish I was as smart as some of the industry experts, but clearly.
But you're boots on the ground. I think
am
you've
boots
got
on the ground.
You've
You're
got
right.
good perspective.
But I think a large part of it is, I've been, even though I've been at the Journal-Gazette for 22 years, I've been, in the newspaper business for more than 30 years. And so I've seen the dips, there's been the really lows and there's been the really highs, and I've experienced that. And obviously this is one of those really low times. And I find that, and I'm sure you'll agree, that any time that kind of times get tough, that the first thing that people start to do is they start to look at kind of those extra things. And obviously newspapers and magazines are those kind of things that they tend to get rid of, but they end up missing it. So they end up finding out, that, hey, I really do need this stuff. But I also think a large element of it is how we are getting our news these days. And, and I would be lying if I said that, obviously social media has played a huge role in it, shifting to digital newspapers, digital stuff, which is what we're trying to currently do, is to shift a lot, because we find that that's what our readers are wanting. They're wanting a lot more to get they want to just pull up their smartphones in the morning time and get their news. So we've been doing a lot of that shifting. And, and I also feel like, I don't think that the newspaper is going to go away anytime soon, because I do feel like a lot of people still want the print. They still like having that newspaper in their hands. But we do have a lot of older readers. Our readership does skew very older. So I feel like that's why it's so important for us to shift to that digital and try to meet those needs of the new readers, because eventually the readers that are going to come up behind these older readers are going to be looking for something different. So I just feel like it's just a whole change in the whole media industry. I feel like everybody is feeling it. And obviously some people, some organizations were more on top of it than a lot of organizations. And I also feel like, obviously larger newspapers, larger media, they can clearly, like your Wall Street Journal and your New York Times, they're going to be able to weather this a little bit more than, obviously a mid-sized paper like ourselves. So, right. Yeah, so it's just going to take, I think, a changing of mindset and a changing of how we do things, which is what we're trying to do.
But if you also, the hard part is when you look at the paper and on average it's 16 pages, mm-hmm. And then you sort of look at that when, because it is a business, and although there is a important local service, civic duty that journalists and news entities like the newspaper play, it's still a business, and yes. So it has to generate revenue.
Sure.
So obviously when revenue goes down, they cut the pages and then they cut the staff, and then you don't have the people covering the local market, and then you rely more on AP wire. And then, mm-hmm. So when you talk about not only how we disseminate the information, I think we have to look at what we're doing, that we're not providing the right kind of information.
Well, and I think that is another thing that we've really been focusing on, that we've realized that obviously people can get their national news and state news and that in other areas. So we've been really in the last few years pushing more of what we can do that no other people can do, which is local news, providing those in-depth stories and information that you just can't get anywhere else. So I think a part of it is utilizing the resources that you have. And yeah, I would be lying if I said we are a business and we are like any other business right now. We are trying to stay profitable but also trying to meet those needs of our readers. So it is a vicious, it's a vicious cycle, and trying to get that balance is really hard. And I know that readers sometimes don't understand that, because they just want their paper and they want to know, why didn't you cover this and why didn't you cover that? So we have been really working hard to try and meet those needs. So yeah, it's a vicious cycle, and I'm sure I could speak for any other business, whether it's a restaurant or whether it's the carpet store down the street.
Right.
It's tough right now.
Right.
So,
but the reality of it is that the role of journalists and the newspaper plays a very different role.
It does.
If you think about it, and this is what I always say, it is the only profession that mm-hmm. is protected by the Constitution.
This is true.
So there's a reason why people need to value
Yes.
it. And I think that part of the problem is that people just Google something, but they don't realize that somebody had to research that and write it and develop it and, work on it.
Yes.
And so I think they just don't understand the back end to it.
Exactly.
Which I'm curious from your perspective, especially as a journalist at a local newspaper, and we've heard a lot the last couple of years of this whole idea of fake news
Yes.
and journalists making it up and, slanting stories
Right.
and not being objective. I'm curious from your standpoint what you think about that and the truth of what journalists really do try to do.
Right. Yeah, I think if anything, I mean, it is aggravating sometimes to see people, obviously take your work and share it or post it elsewhere and then you don't get credit for it. I mean, you will hear a lot of griping about that. But in the same sense, I almost feel like sometimes I'm glad that at least they're using the right news because, there's too many times when people will tell me something. I'm like, well, where did you get that? And they're like, oh, well, I saw it on Facebook. And I'm like, ah. It's like, don't believe everything you see on Facebook because that's not good. So, it's concerning that a lot of people will take their news from social media, whether it's Instagram or it's Facebook, and that is what they believe is the truth. And it's hard to combat that. It's hard to, when people see that and then you're trying to write a story and try to have it fact-based, and then the person's like, well, I saw on Facebook, da-da-da-da-da, and you're like, well, I can't, back that information up. So yeah, it is frustrating. It's frustrating on both of those sides. And I feel like journalists over the years have, like you said, have battled. That's a battle I don't think we're ever going to win, especially the deeper that we get into social media. Now we're dealing with so many other platforms that are popping up. It's like, I honestly, at this point, I'm going to make myself sound old. I can't even keep up sometimes.
Right.
It's so crazy. So.
But I think also really what's important to talk about is really the intent of journalists. Mm-hmm. I don't think that any good journalist goes into something trying to be biased
right.
or to be slanted or to have their agenda. I mean, obviously that's what op-eds do, or if you have a column, that's your point of view. But I think in general that journalists really do try very hard. I mean, there's not to say it's just like anything else, there's a few bad apples,
yes.
but I mean, wouldn't you agree that most are trying to get both sides of a story and really present the facts of an issue and giving the reader what they think is just the information so they can make the decision?
Yeah, no, I do. This is actually a discussion that my husband and I have regularly because he, I won't name which station, but there are obviously, a right wing and a left wing station, and he watches one of those, and we have this discussion all the time because obviously when people watch, Fox or they watch CNN or they watch, what MSNBC, whatever they're watching, there is clearly an agenda with that. And it's hard to combat that. And I'm an old school journalist, so when I go into it, I do ask all those questions. I try to, do facts and be accurate as I possibly can, get both sides. So it is hard to combat that when somebody is watching one particular thing that's slanted or bent on a particular issue, and then, you're trying to write something different. Yeah, so I think that you're right. I mean, the intent there, I think for most journalists is to try to be as accurate and unbiased as you possibly can. But, it's hard to combat those other issues when some people are not. And I point, I guess I don't want to be unfair, but I suppose I'm pointing my finger more to the national media than I am more of like the Journal Gazette and some of your smaller newspapers that are, like you said, in the trenches, boots on the ground, trying to get in there and get this information, because it's a lot easier to just throw something on the screen in 5 seconds or read the headline and on the bottom of a screen than to actually sit and read 30 inches. And some people these days, they they don't have time, or they don't want to make the time to do that. So it's hard to battle that.
And so what I think also is interesting is that, publishing a book, I mean, first of all, an actual book, not a, digital version of the book. And they have found that it's like the same thing, I think, with print and paper.
Right.
I think we have this tendency to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Oh, it's all going to go away. And then it slowly comes back. That people do like print. They do like something to hold or something they can mark or, because if you have it in your Kindle or iPad, whatever, then try to find it and mark things, and then you can't remember what page something was on.
Yes.
Or, so the idea of it, so I think that's, what do you, and now when you work on a newspaper, obviously, if you have 2 days to write a story, you're lucky. So which do you like better? Do you like writing more for the newspaper, or did you like having the time to really spend and get entrenched and write a book?
That's a good question. I did enjoy writing this book because I had a lot of time to go, research and spend time and make corrections and that sort of thing. And obviously in journalism, sometimes, like you said, you don't have that time. It could be that unfortunately you're like 10 minutes before deadline and you're having to turn something out, and once it's turned in, you're just praying the next morning that there's not a correction. Because you try really hard. And then even though there's a bunch of eyes that read that, and inevitably we're human, so sometimes that stuff happens. So it was nice writing this and having that great amount of time. The good thing, though, with me, I think, which is a difference on the news side, is being in features, I am able to work quite a bit in advance, so that gives me a little bit more time to do that. But I remember my news side time, and 5 minutes before deadline, I'm like, ticking it out or dictating over the phone from somebody that's far away, so it can, I don't know. I do, though, have the satisfaction. I am sort of an adrenaline junkie, so I do kind of have that satisfaction of meeting that deadline and then just sort of like, okay, it's done. So I don't think now, though, as now that I'm older, I want to do a lot more of that.
Right.
So it was nice doing this, yes.
Well, I think it's funny because I remember when I was at the Chicago Sun-Times and I had my first in the arts and leisure section, the first story, because on Sundays, that's a big, large print paper. It's not the tab size. And I had the above the fold big story, and I was so proud, and I got it and whatever. And then that afternoon, I go out to where the community grills are, and somebody was crinkling it up and using it to start the grill. And it also reminds you, that what you sort of do doesn't have that, permanence like a book does.
Exactly. Yeah, that is so true. It is so true. But then again, I get these phone calls. Like I just got one the other day. And they're like, I ran across this article that I had clipped out in whatever year, or I have this article from like 1950 some that I had kept. And, I didn't know if you wanted to do like a follow-up story or do something on it. So I think for me, those are the moments that are really special that we're talking about how people do love print and how these are memories and these are archives, and you can go on Google and you can search this stuff, but some of these things you just can't find. And so for these people, these are their memories and their archives, and they keep these, they clip them out and they put them away. They put them in scrapbooks or, trunks or whatever. And then they call me 50 years later and tell me they have this. Right. So I think those are special moments.
But I think they also found that those things are really important for memories, because like we don't, a lot of people have the ticket stub from the very first rock concert they went to, or they have that their mother kept that first clipping when they won some award in elementary school.
Yeah.
And they do create those memories, and they give you that tactile, visceral, which we don't have anymore.
Right.
And so, and how many things do people not print out on their phone? I mean, I also say with print, the importance of it is when you go into a restaurant, you don't see framed Yelp reviews.
No, you don't.
And you know, when you read, when they show you on commercials, you know, comments about a film,
Yeah.
they don't say, they say so-and-so from the New York Times, so-and-so from the Washington Post, so-and-so, they're not, you know, from Mr. Movie. I mean, so there is sort of that gravitas and importance of, but there is also that it is, you know, fluid and disposable.
Exactly.
So I think that we have to be everywhere. I mean, you have to be where, you know, but, you know, but with newspapers, you know, they've always complained. There's never been a time since the dawn of newspapers that circulation is down and the revenue is down. I mean, the average person historically did not start reading a daily newspaper until they were 25.
Exactly.
So and part of the problem also that we have is people became subscribers or read a newspaper because they saw their parents do it. That their parents went out, got the paper in the morning, everybody sat, you know, somebody read the comics, they read, and then they kept that going. So we lose also that, you know, familiar kind of thing, and also people talking about it.
Yeah, it goes back to what I was saying, you know, that next generation where they're, you know, this is what they're on, you know, they pick up their smartphones, this is how they get their news. And you know, it's so funny, like my son is 21, and one of the things he loves history. And so he really surprised me this last year. He's been going into like antique shops and stuff. Anytime, he really likes World War II information. So whenever he finds these old newspapers with World War II and for some reason cigarette ads, I don't know why. So he buys these newspapers and he will come home with them and magazines and stuff. And
well, especially Life magazine, that would be the height,
Yeah, and I'm just like, wow, okay, so, you know, so he obviously at 21 is finding the value in this print stuff that you obviously couldn't get today. I mean, you can come down to the library, obviously, and sit on the microfilm or microfiche and pull that stuff up, but yeah.
But you also want to see it, like, when you see it, on Google and stuff, it's sort of set differently. It's not literally how it looks and on the page, and then you could see what else is around it. I mean, I feel part of the problem with today is that if people are only getting their news on Facebook, first of all, they're only talking to people who are like them.
Yes.
And second of all, I feel like, well, they're only liking, and therefore because of algorithms, they're only going to get more of what they like.
Right.
Which is when you pick up the newspaper and maybe you're looking at your column, you know, about, like we were talking about all the unusual things people leave on headstones. But next to it is a piece about some nonprofit that's struggling, or the fact that some council person said this. And so at least then you have a chance that maybe you'll be engaged and you'll read a headline or see a picture that will get you to engage in something that you wouldn't otherwise, which we don't have that. And I think that that's really important.
It is.
Especially to know what's going on in your, in the world.
Yes.
So I'm part of a little bit of a pessimist when it comes to people recognizing the value and the importance of being well educated and knowledgeable about their community and what's happening. And I'm wondering what you think, how you feel about that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, you know, a lot of the reporters, when they come back, when they go to public meetings and stuff, they are disheartened from time to time because they're like, you know, there was only maybe one person or there was nobody, you know, at this public meeting, at this public hearing. And then after it happens, and after the decision's made, then all of a sudden, you know, people are like all upset. So I feel like, but you know, I feel like that's an issue though that's been, you know, people have done that for years and years and years. And again, I think that's why it's an important part with the newspaper, because a lot of times you won't see that, you know, unless it's a huge issue, and then some, you know, you'll hear about it. So yeah, you know, and again, I think that, I don't want to say I'm pessimist about it, but I do think that unfortunately these days, I think we get caught up in our own lives, and unless it's actually affecting us, you know, we're not too good about yelling about things. So and then sometimes it's after the fact. So I feel like that, you know, it goes back to what I was talking about with people and time and the whole, you know, just trying to get everything, cram everything in, and you know, and I'm guilty of it as well. I would be lying if I said, you know, when I get up in the morning time, I have a certain routine, but then, you know, I'm like, oh, well, I have 5 minutes left. Maybe I can, you know, do this, this, and this. And sometimes things get overlooked. And so, I feel like that people probably can be more engaged in their community, but it also makes me feel good, considering that I see all of these groups that have formed in the last couple of years, you know, these organizations where people are getting more active and they're doing more, you know, whether it's social justice or social issues, or they're getting involved in government, and they are speaking out. So there's that part of it as well. But again, I think with newspapers, that's again, you know, that sometimes you're not going to find out about these public hearings or this public information, or, you know, that your taxes are going to go up, or unless you read it in a newspaper or, you know, some form of media. So I feel like the media definitely has a role in that. So.
And so as you putting on your reporter hat, and as you worked on this book and looking at that you've been in Fort Wayne for the last 22 years, what has surprised you the most about Fort Wayne and where it's been, where it is, and where it's going?
The last few years, it really has been the downtown. I will be the first one to say, you know, if you would have talked to me probably about 10 years ago, I would have been the one griping about downtown. I'd have been griping about the fact that, you know, there was not much to do downtown, that it was all, you know, lawyers and whatever downtown. And so, you know, when these ideas started coming out about things that they're going to do, and like I said, a lot of people just kind of getting in there and taking charge and like, okay, you know, we're going to do this. We're going to, you know, put murals on the side of buildings. We're going to, yeah, if you would have told me 10 years ago, we're going to paint murals on the side of the building and people are going to come downtown, I'd have been like, what?
Right. Well, if you even think about it, even with what I understand was the moving of the Tin Cap Stadium.
Yes.
I mean, nobody really realizes that the organization that put the stake in the ground to say we are going to bring back and support downtown was actually the Allen County Public Library.
Yes.
And its downtown branch. It was
really
the first that said we need to be in the heart of downtown.
Yes.
And then if you really think about that, there were still all the churches, there was all these religious in downtown. But that was a start. But even I heard with the Tin Caps that people were like, well, we don't need it. We have a perfectly fine. And
we have right. We have a good stadium, and it was a great stadium. But yeah, you're right. By bringing it downtown, it really kind of changed things. And so now you're seeing more restaurants popping up, more events happening. You know, one of my favorite things every summer, and you know, I was disappointed that it didn't happen last year, but I understand, is, you know, Rock the Plaza. You know, so you're getting people downtown. So all these things that are now happening, and like we talked about, you know, the Promenade Park with all that stuff. You know, it's just sort of that domino effect when you start, you know, focusing on downtown and start taking charge some of these organizations. So yeah, for me, I feel like that is the biggest surprise for me, is really how you have seen such a change. And even, like I said, in the last probably 2 years, the changes in downtown.
And, you know, one of the things that I was thinking, though, when you look at, through your lens as a reporter, some of the issues and difficulties.
Yes.
And so even in the book, there aren't as many things in like Southeast Fort Wayne to do, or places to go, or, you know, things that you captured in here. And I know that there's a lot of efforts to, but I think that one of the things that we could be doing is what you do have in Southeast and even beyond downtown are these neighborhoods that have really great histories.
They do.
And the people who live in them, and they do have their own personalities and nuances. So I think that we're not, as much as I like, you know, the 100 things to do in Fort Wayne, I think also looking at all the neighborhoods. And because when people travel, when you go to a city, right? What are the things you want to do? Well, one, you want to do the things that someone who lives there does. Two, you want to go out into the neighborhoods to experience the culture and living, and you want to go to the stores and the restaurants that the locals go to, right? So I think that that's really important, and I'm not sure that we do enough of that for ourselves.
Right.
I mean, did you find that I know that you exhaustively did research and spent time. I mean, did you notice anything else like that, or did you find that, like, when you looked to see if there was? Because even like the one restaurant that everybody talked about in Southeast, Links.
Yeah.
You know, that's not open.
Right.
And then like, even I was surprised. Like, I was thinking like the African American History.
Yes.
Museum, and I'm like, wait, it's not open all the time. Like,
That's right. Yeah, you got to do an appointment. Right. Yeah, and some of that is when I was doing the research, there were a few things, like, for instance, in the 2007. I mean, I know I mentioned the Clyde, but again, I have to say, the pandemic played kind of a role in this, because there were some places that I wanted to include, but I just wasn't sure if they were going to be open a year later, or if they were going to be sustainable. And thankfully they were. But I really kind of had to think long and hard. I'm like, okay, do I include them in here? Because what happens if they end up closing? And an example of that, unfortunately, is like Hall's, original drive-in. And I almost put them in the book. And I thought, no, okay, I do have the Clyde, and I have some of these other places, so I'll just kind of put them on the list. And then, we found out, unfortunately, that December 23rd, they're closing, after 75 years. But yeah, in the southeast part of the area, I mean, I know of several new restaurants that have popped up over there. And the problem is and in the restaurant business, especially nowadays, you just don't know if, how that's going to be. Obviously, like, you have the Friendly Fox, and again, I don't want to keep harping on the 2007, but there's a lot of stuff, in the 2007. But, that kind of leads to other areas, and there are a lot of efforts that's been going on with some parks and stuff over there. So, yeah, when I was doing the research, I did find things that were, in that area, but I had to kind of, pause for a moment and be like, okay, I'm just not so sure, if this is going to be, because, like I said, I had to kind of take all that into consideration because of the pandemic. There were a lot of things that I didn't include, not just in the southeast area, but all over, because I just wasn't sure if it was going to, survive. So.
Right. But I think it's also just, sort of interesting and telling of where also we sort of do need to focus.
Yes.
And if we want to do this economic development and engagement, we need to give these areas these types of things that are draws.
I agree.
And that has to be, I think, because I think a lot of the places and the things that you talked about, like, the tin caps in the riverfront, the greenways, we talked about the library.
Right.
A lot of those things get support from both public and private. So I think when you look at how we got this list of 100 things, yes, it was on the backs of a lot of individuals, but they get a lot of support from the city and the community, and in some cases even state dollars. I mean, you look at, like, with Arts United and the campus. So I think that we have to, did that surprise you at all when you looked at how much where, the things that you knew would be on the list, where they sort of are an anchor, but the support that they get, and they're not so dependent on just one revenue stream? And
well, honestly, I didn't really look at a lot of that, but I'm thinking about just some of these people where we're talking about, they kind of like did their own, like pulled up their bootstraps, and they were like, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to make it survive, just like George's International Market, which, if you haven't been there, is like so amazing. And they obviously turned what used to be the bakery, and thankfully kept all the bakery stuff. It's now inside the market. But now they have the taqueria next door, which is just great if you haven't been to that. So, and I think about all that. Obviously, when you get into those neighborhoods, you can kind of see that culture come out. And I think that's what's great. So, in that area where George's is, there's a great number of Hispanic businesses and restaurants. And then if you just go, one street over, you have a lot of Asian grocery stores and restaurants and so forth. And
what you're going to have, sort of pulling that all together, will be Electric Works.
Exactly.
So
yeah, and see, but the great thing about that is Electric Works, yes, now. But these people were there before. So I feel like with Electric Works, once that opens, that's going to give that boost to those people, like you said, who said, okay, I want to do this and I'm going to make this work. So I feel like yes, that's going to help them, but they were there first. So
and they stuck it with it.
They did.
Yeah, and they really try to work with the neighborhood. No, like there's across the street from George's, there's a hair salon, and that's where all the girls go for their quinceañeras to get their hair done. And I mean, it's a very elaborate, and it's and you talk about really seeing diversity within that, just that little sort of circle
block,
there.
Yeah, a little area.
Yeah.
It's insane. And you know, my daughter graduated from Southside, and at the time, now she is now 25, and when she graduated, I do believe, now I could be wrong with what it is now, but at the time, somebody had told me that there were more than 30 different languages that were spoken at Southside.
Yeah.
And I'm imagining there's probably more than that now. And, you know, and when you think about that and you think about the size of Fort Wayne, I mean, that's pretty impressive. That's pretty amazing. And all of those people that have decided they have this dream and they open these businesses and they find these niche in these neighborhoods. Yeah, you're right. And you know, going into, so I did try to, in the book, try to not just stay downtown, but also try to go out into these areas. So like if you were to go to Foster Park, you know, you're going to go through some of those neighborhoods. You're going to be out in that area and you're going to see these places. You know, if you go to George's, you're going to notice all these other restaurants or all these other businesses.
You're also going to see all these products that you have no idea what they are, or what, you know, like the cheeses and the fruits, but you just have to ask.
You do,
you
do.
Or how you're supposed to, like a lot of people don't realize, because there's even the Panderia on Wells, how you're supposed to take the tray with the tongs and how you're actually supposed to do it.
Yes.
So a lot of times, I think also what this shows is that people shouldn't be afraid. I mean, partly I think, especially as features editors, and we really want to get people, what I always say is beyond that 3 miles of where they live or where they work, because that's pretty much the zone people will stay, and maybe the path that they take to go to and from the two places.
Right.
So we want to get them out of their comfort zone and get them to go out and adventure and try new things. And I think one of the things that you have to do is not be afraid that you won't know, or you may at first be a little uncomfortable, or maybe you don't know what a cheese is, but go ask somebody, what kind of this cheese, or, you know, and because you also don't know, I'm sure you have fabulous stories. You know, you talked about the gentleman from the book signing, but I am sure you have fabulous stories of the people that you met, both who are running some of these places and the other people who were there while you were there that you met along the way.
Yeah. It like I said, one of the best things, I had told told a person this the other day, one of the coolest things about this, well, obviously doing the things, but also meeting the people at these places and talking to them. And when they find out I'm doing a book and they're like, oh, wow, that's so cool, you know, but talking to them about what they have done and what, you know, their business and that kind of thing is. Yeah, they are more than willing to answer questions, more than willing to talk about what they do and what's available. So that meeting the different people has been a great part of it. But you know, that's kind of in my DNA, though. That's you know, that
partly why you became a journalist.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. You know, talking to people, that's what I do. So
what are some of the one or two of the people that really you remember or stood out to you, or? Oh,
goodness sakes. That's actually a good question and kind of a hard question. There is a mention in here about a bowling alley in the bottom of a church.
Yeah.
It's in Most Precious Blood Catholic Church.
Now, do you have to make an appointment to go to the bowling?
You do. Now, they do have leagues, so you can join their bowling leagues and stuff like that. But you can rent it all out, too, if you want to. Like, so if you want to throw a party and you want to have your own bowling thing, you can rent it out. But the man who runs, he actually just passed away, which I'm very sad about. He has run this thing since like 1970s, and he's been doing this all on his own. Like, he had to learn how to fix things, and because a lot of the equipment that he has down there, it's like from the 1940s.
It's like what they found at the General Electric. The Electric Works. They had a bowling alley there.
Yeah, exactly. And which I hope they
keep it.
That would be so great. Yeah, so he had to figure out how to, fix all this stuff, because a lot of the parts, just didn't exist anymore. And so talking to him and just like his passion of that and going there and just seeing how cool, he was a really cool guy to meet. And now his son and his daughter have taken over since he has passed away. And they're going to keep it going, which I hope they do, because it is just such a cool place if you've never been to it. I mean, literally, it's just this old bowling alley in a church, in the bottom of a church.
Right. And I think it also demonstrates the passion and that people have
Yes.
for what they do in these places, and that, so it's not only, if you go, it's not only something fun for you to do, but it's also to appreciate and show that you respect and admire what they do to do these things. So
another one I can think of is the owner of West Central Micro Creamery. It was so funny meeting him and talking to him. I mean, because he comes up with all these unique ice cream flavors, but he doesn't eat ice cream.
Right.
And I'm like, what? How can you run an ice cream shop and not eat ice cream?
But I love the vintage bicycle that they have with the old, it's the wooden, and it has they go and they take it like they're sometimes on the landing.
Yes.
I think that is the cutest thing.
Yeah, it is.
It's like the neighborhood ice cream man.
Yeah, but he is so passionate about what he does, and he also is passionate about the community. And so he always is working with different people and being a part and supporting other local businesses, which I just absolutely love. So every time I talk to him, he's so quiet. He's such a quiet guy, but every time I talk to him, I just find out more and more. So he's another one of those unique characters.
And then what you also find is that it's really a family business, because his wife, his wife is the one to talk to if you want the down and dirty.
I have not met her yet.
Yeah,
and
well,
I
she
need to
also,
meet
but
her.
partly because they also have other jobs.
Yes.
And I think they have little children, but again, you see that a lot of these it's a family affair, and So are you working on the next 100 list of next 100?
I do have the next 100. I don't know if or when they're going to do a second edition. My hope is that they will do one, but I do have another list already started.
And if not, you have a great place to start writing about them.
I do.
And then we could compile them. Then you would have the book already written.
There we go.
Maybe that'll be your, for start in 2022 in your column in the Journal Gazette.
There we go.
So we'll have to keep looking for that. But at the end of each And Good Company program, I ask guests the same 12 questions that French novelist Marcel Proust popularized from a Victorian parlor game. So what is your favorite word?
My favorite word, I don't know if it's my favorite word, but it definitely is an overused word from mine. And mine is always, come on.
What is your least favorite word?
Oh, goodness, my least favorite word. Goodness sakes. Probably moist. I don't know.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Oh, you know what? Honestly, just talking to people. I love to talk to people and get ideas. I feel like everywhere I go, if I talk to somebody, I end up with a new idea.
What turns you off creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Oh, rude people. Rude people.
What sound or noise do you love?
I love 80s music. So anytime like an 80s song starts, I know what it is.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Oh, gosh. Forgive me, Colts fans, but that huge bong that they do at the games, I hate that bong. I hate it.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Oh, I would love to learn how to do TV stuff. I really love puppets, and so I would love to do my own little puppet show. I don't know if that's weird or not. Sorry.
No, that's how Jim Henson started.
There you go.
So you could be the next,
I could.
What profession would you not like to do?
Honestly, I don't think I would be good at a desk job, like not being able to get up and go out and do things. I have to be challenged, so.
What do you consider your greatest achievement?
I know it's going to be cliche, but it has to be my children.
Who, living or dead, would you most like to have a conversation with?
Oh, goodness. I would have to say, spiritually, probably somebody from the Bible, probably Jesus. There's a couple of others as well, but yeah, I would definitely like to have conversations with them.
How would you like to die?
Very easy. I would almost probably want to die in my sleep.
And if heaven exists, What would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Oh, goodness sakes. I really would like to hear him say, well done.
You wouldn't want him to say, "Oi, do I have a good story for you?"
I would like him to say, well done. Welcome, come in.
Well, I want to thank Terri Richardson, the features editor at the Journal Gazette and author of the new book, 100 Things to Do in Fort Wayne Before You Die. And now we know how you would like to die, and you just want God to welcome you in after you've been busy.
After I've been doing all my 100 things,
Right.
yeah.
And you can learn more about Ann Good Company and all the other great conversations we have had at anngoodcompany.info. And we look forward to next week when you can again enjoy a seat at the table for great conversation and good company.